Welcome back to another episode of Content Amplified. Today I'm joined by Ernesto. Ernesto, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It is really an honor. Had heard many of your episodes and just wow, very impressive. Coming from someone who has to listen to audio virtually 24/7, what you do is quite outstanding. So you should be really proud.
Well, thank you so much. I really do appreciate that. Ernesto, I am extremely excited for the subject today. This is a world I know almost nothing about, and I'm excited to learn about it. I'm sure our audience is too. But before we dive in, let's get to know you. Tell us a little bit about your work history and your career.
So, I am the executive director of radio programming and content innovation initiatives at KQED in San Francisco. Public radio is referenced in by the FCC as what is known as non-commercial educational radio. It was founded many decades ago to provide an educational space on the radio dial. This is where public radio tends to reside in terms of broadcasting. And for me, this work is primarily about the radio broadcasts, in our case, 88.5 here in San Francisco and 89.3 in Sacramento, as well as our streaming services through smart speakers, our app, and online. In addition, part of my work is about trying to determine how we at KQED, as one of the largest public broadcasters in the country, can continue to innovate around our content. What kinds of AI work can we be doing? What kinds of community representation work should we be doing? And what more can we as an organization do to ensure that the audience feels connected to public broadcasting and make sure that they feel seen and heard throughout our daily programming?
That's amazing. So, the subject today, what B2B content teams can learn from public radio. So, let's start at the very beginning. When it comes to programming with public radio, how does that work? How do you know what to actually plan for, what content to create? How does that whole system work inside of this space, again, that I know almost nothing about? How does that function?
Well, Benjamin, I can probably tell you this. I'm sure there are probably, and thank you for giving permission to the audience for this too, because I suspect there's probably a portion of the audience that has no idea what public broadcasting is. And so it's great to get into this piece of the conversation. So you can think about your favorite radio station. Perhaps it's a pop station or a country station or a news talk station that does, say, sports and gives you the headlines and also broadcasts some of the games. All of those stations end up programming based on a number of day parts. So there's morning drive, for lack of a better word, that's usually around 5 to 6 a.m. till about 9 a.m. when, as the name suggests, most people end up driving to work. And then there's afternoon drive, which is typically 3 until 7 p.m. And then midday, which is the time that is occupied between AM and PM drive, and then evening and weekend content that a radio station would provide. So most of those stations have a set format. In the case of a sports talk station, you're going to hear games, you're going to hear programming about what the next game is going to be or what the previous game is. On a music station's format, you're just going to hear music. You might hear some lunchtime types of special programming and such. And in the case of public broadcasting, it operates in a very similar kind of format, but it operates generally in the lens of two different kinds of content that's provided. In KQED's case, it's going to be news and talk, news and information. So you'll have news programming that's in morning and afternoon drive, and news-themed talk programming that happens in midday, updating people about the latest headlines. Some public broadcasters are formatted as music stations. One of the more famous examples of this that people may have seen on YouTube or seen stickers of is KEXP in Seattle, which is all music. They'll also, however, as I mentioned, similar to the commercial stations that many of us are familiar with, do special kinds of programming. And in our case, going back to KQED, we tend to follow the news cycle, but we also understand that the audience comes to us for analysis. Last year, the BBC did an international survey of what audiences are looking for when they turn to broadcasters. And for the most part, these audiences said, we already have heard the story. We found out about it on social media. Our feeds, our friends, other people told us that there was a big Supreme Court decision, or the president made a particular decision, or there is something happening in Congress. But when we turn on terrestrial broadcasters, those legacy media that we're all familiar with, we're turning to you for context. So we want to hear the analysis. We want to understand what this means for us now and any historical precedent that has happened. And so our goal is to try to serve the information need, but also provide the crucial context that we understand the audience desperately wants, particularly when the news cycle is hot and heavy and people really see headlines all over the place and they want to understand, I can't make sense of all this, and would like you to help guide me to explain what is happening in the country and the world in many cases.
Okay, so I absolutely love what you just said there. When it comes to companies as well, this is something I am very passionate about, and I think you explained it so beautifully. People are not coming to read anyone's content for the most part to learn about the story or just get the facts. Because, like you said, they're out there, it's easy to find the information. What they're coming to you for that is a unique perspective and an insider scoop about this is how you get context. This is what this means. This is what I would interpret this as. This is how it could affect your life, your job, your whatever. This is how we're taking this information and how we're going to apply it to our lives. So I love that you're focused on context. I think there's so much value to that. And anyone listening that creates content, or sorry, that creates content, give it context. I think there's so much to that.
You're so right. And you've covered this in previous podcasts, but I think if you're new here, welcome first and foremost. But also, this needs to be restated. Trust and relationship building are crucial. They are the essential lifeblood of what we do as broadcasters, and that's commercial or non-commercial. That's public broadcasters or your stations that you're probably most familiar with. It really is about ensuring that people trust what you have to say and that there's a relationship there for which you can start to build upon relevance. Because I've had people pitch various things to me, anything from products to guests and anything and everything in between. And really, the thing that I always look for is this going to be relevant to the audience? Does this relate to something that's happening in the community and in the world and in the news cycle that they can immediately connect the dots to? Public broadcasting studies have indicated that the average listener to a public radio or public television audience member, those folks who are attuned to these outlets, tend to be educated, they tend to be affluent. They tend to be people who have disposable income. They have homes. They are sometimes a little bit older. They understand that I guess maybe a better way to put that is their level of discernment is going to be a little bit higher than maybe somebody who may not be in any of those categories. And so therefore, if you just say, well, here's a product, a local person made it, or here's a product, you should be interested in it, they're going to tune it out. And I think most people at this point, because a lot of us are very sophisticated around marketing, understand that. And so you really have to, as you pointed out in previous podcasts, really need to lean into that relationship. You need to lean into being trustworthy and just continue to be relevant to people's lives and the needs that they have.
That. So diving into that to double click a little bit further, in public radio, how are you building trust? And how are you getting the information back from the audience that your message is resonating, that you're hitting home on the things that matter? I know all sorts of people are great at, hey, I'm going to push a bunch of content out. But how do you build that trust and really kind of get the data back about, okay, cool, this is what our audience wants and cares about. Let's focus on this.
For us, it's really about consistent messaging to people and then consistent delivery. And what I mean by that, and I separate them for a reason. So, in terms of delivery, I think delivery is clearly the most important part. You want to be on the news, you want to be on the information, you want to be in the cycle, whatever that is for the audience and what they rely on you for. In our case, it's news. It's our also analysis. And so we do our best to be constantly in the news cycle, using social media tools to listen to what the conversations are, monitoring press releases, monitoring city council meetings, monitoring all the issues that are of importance to the community, and that we're judging by both analytics, and we're also judging from the surveys that we do with audiences to make sure that we're delivering that content consistently. So that delivery is really important. The messaging is also important. And I think you've hit on this as well in previous podcasts. We are very much in an attention economy. People don't have a lot of time. They will forget about things very easily, and not purposefully, but because there's so much coming at us that it's very hard to remember the value proposition for anything. And so, therefore, we need to be constantly reminding people that we are your source for news and information. We are your source for when the administration has made a new decision. We are your source when there is an emergency. We are your source for what's happening in your community. And we're here every day of the week, providing 18 newscasts a day. And this is what we do for you to make sure you are an engaged and informed and inspired individual in your community. And so those two sets of messaging are very, very important. We judge that in a variety of ways. So for example, Nielsen data we get every single week. We understand what's hitting and what's not. And we also understand audience and seasonal habits. In our case, for example, we may have seasonal trends that happen with broadcasting, and all stations in the Bay Area and in many communities have seasonal trends. So you can think about your community, and when you think, oh, a lot of people seem to be going on vacation, that's a seasonal trend that happens for a lot of broadcasters. If you're going on vacation and your friends and neighbors are, chances are that's happening around your community. So broadcasters notice these kinds of things. We also do a lot of qualitative studies with audiences, focus groups, and so much more. For those of you who have been hanging through this podcast, wondering, how is this important to me? Here is your gem. There was a recent study that was done by a coalition of public broadcasting industry organizations called Researching Unmet Needs. They did a study of 30,000 Americans, from those with high awareness to those with no awareness whatsoever of public broadcasting. They did this and broke this study down by region, and they also did it down by topics and needs. That study is online right now. If you're curious about what a public broadcasting audience is interested in, you can go look at the executive summary and also a lot of the data, and you'll get a sense of what that audience is interested in. We looked at it, as you can guess, with a ton of interest, because we want to understand where not just the audience is at and what they're interested in, but what they're starting to get a little bit more interest in as a trend that we want to start to watch. We look at Google Trends, we look at Chartbeat, we look at all of the analytics that you are probably familiar with as marketers. However, we're also looking at what people are starting to indicate an interest in, because we need to be on top of that, as I suspect your audience needs to be too.
That's so cool. Okay, I have a couple more quick questions for you. And I just don't want to waste this experience
And
because you
I'll
have
try to
so
be
many
quick
cool
about it,
insights.
because being from Texas, I'm a storyteller and I can give very long answers to things.
You're totally
So
fine.
feel free to give me the hook at some point, because I am more than happy to share all I can with this just dynamic audience of leaders that you bring to this podcast.
That's so kind of you to share your insights today. So, in public radio, you're expert storytellers. That's your product, is the content. What can B2B marketers learn from that experience about how to be better storytellers when maybe it's not their primary focus day in and day out, like someone in public radio? How can we just improve our capability of being storytellers?
You've talked about this, I think, in a previous podcast and in longer form, and I think it really bears drawing out. And I'll try to give a very simple formula. Think about what your why is. Think about why someone would be interested in this. If you're pitching this to someone, why would they be interested in it? Why would they be interested in it? Try to put yourselves in their shoes, in the shoes of an editor. Why would they be interested? A good model for this is, I think, the one that Marshall Gans has taught over the years. Marshall Gans, the noted speechwriter and professor and linguist, who's taught this model of the power of self, the power of us, and the power of now, which is essentially, what is this and who am I? And I say, what is this if you're thinking about your product, but what is this? How does it relate to us? And then how does it relate to right now? How does it relate to this moment? Why is this particular thing important to what is happening right now? So as you think about that product, that person, that service, tell that story, but also relate it to the audience. Relate it back to the person you're talking to. Why would they care? How can they connect to it? And then why is there urgency around this in this moment? Given everything else that's happening, why is this important? Why does this deserve someone's attention? And I know that that can be a challenge, particularly if you're not that person that has the time to think about story, or maybe is uncomfortable doing it. Sometimes it's a little bit hard to develop that comfort level with talking in front of a microphone, talking in front of people, talking to an editor who might already be a little bit skeptical, and you just get a little bit nervous with that. And it's completely understandable. But give some time to yourself, a moment, and it doesn't need to be a long time. Give yourself 15 minutes just to walk through that type of a model and think about that why. And if you can come up with something, great. I went to the Sulzberger Executive Leadership Program, and one of the things that we talked about quite actively is it's okay to fail fast. So give yourself that 15 minutes, try it out. If it doesn't work, it's okay. Try it again and try with a new remix of your model, or start again based on the feedback that you're getting from people. Try it with some friends, try it with some colleagues, and then start to ideate a little bit. Again, it doesn't need to take a long time. You don't need to spend hours and weeks and months on it. You will eventually start to spend hours and weeks and months on it, frankly, but just give yourself a little bit of time and a little permission to make that mistake. And understand that it is okay. It's far better to say, I've made the mistake and I'm going to discard it and I'm going to try again anew, or just fix this one up a little bit, than to spend weeks and hours and months of time that you're billing back, or time with your organization, and you don't know what that why is. And you've basically burned away a lot of time that you could have if you just spent that 15 minutes upon 15 minutes to develop what that why is and what that story is that makes it so compelling.
Okay, that's amazing. I absolutely love that. So well said. Thank you so much. Okay, one other quick question, because I love to get tactical. I love for people to be able to take specific insights, and there's been a million already in this episode. But if you had any tactical advice that someone in content marketing could take away today from your experience throughout your whole career, looking at public radio, everything going on, something that people could do starting today to improve their content marketing or their storytelling or whatever it may be they're working on. Any final pieces of advice that you would recommend?
The most important thing that you can do for your brand, your clients, and yourself is consistency. Being consistent about your message, about what you do, what your clients do, what your organization does, and just building on that. I know that that can be one of the hardest things to ask for somebody. So, of course, I shoot for the top, but it really does matter. And it matters because of, as I mentioned earlier, the relationship and also the relevance. Listening to what people have to say and being present constantly makes a difference to people. When they see that you're out there and they understand what you're about, they may not engage it, they may not always click it, but they're aware of it. And that matters to people, because in a world where it is all about attention, knowing that somebody is just regularly present and is talking to them about something that they understand makes a difference to them or could make a difference, or this person is interesting or insightful or has something to say that they're curious about, matters when they actually need it, because they remember the fact that you're a consistent individual doing that kind of work. I'd also say, related to that consistency, the relationship does matter. So you can consistently send me a press release about, or press releases or inquiries about, say, a client or a guest that you'd like me to pick up on at a station, or an editor if you'd like a story about something, but also being consistent about the relationship getting to know the person and getting to know what they're interested in. So you don't have to always pitch them. Sometimes you can say, hey, we talked about this and I thought about you, and this isn't a pitch, but I just thought about you and thought you might be interested, is one, about consistency, but also it's about that relationship, because now you've consistently been present with that person and now you've also cemented the relationship. So it's not just transactional, please take my guest, or please look at my marketing, but I thought about you and what you're interested in. And editors without fail remember that.
That's amazing. Ernesto, we have run out of time. This is so amazing. Thank you for your insights today. If anyone wants to reach out and continue the conversation online and connect with you, how and where can they find you?
You can find me on virtually everywhere on social. I'm just EAXLR. Music nerds will recognize XLR because it is a microphone connector cable, but EAXLR. You can also find me at my website, ernestoaguilar.com.
I love it. Well, Ernesto, again, thank you so much for the time and insights today. Really appreciate it.
You got it.